All right, man, peace. So for those of you brothers that follow the NBA, you know by now that Mr. Jimmy Butler has catapulted his name into one of the more prominent positions in the sports world over the course of the last week or so because of his antics and his hijinks and trying to necessitate a trade by the Minnesota Timberwolves to get rid of him. He's deciding to embrace his agent of chaos alter under the inspiration of Kyrie Irving. And that's why I've stated in other videos, the NBA is going to have to try to figure out what they're going to do about this. Because right now, their more prominent players are being put in such an advantageous position with all the money that they're getting, not just on the court, but off the court, that with the precedent that Kyrie Irving set a couple of years ago when he forced a trade out of Cleveland, many other prominent players are starting to follow suit. We saw Kawhi Leonard do the same thing, and then we also have now seen Jimmy Butler do the same thing. Many of these players now think that when they're unhappy in an environment, they do not have to honor their contract. Well, Jimmy Butler decided to strategically cause an upheaval at the Minnesota Timberwolves practice because he knew that he was going to be interviewed by Miss Rachel Nichols, who seems to be the point person for all of the prominent players in the NBA for whatever reason. Who knows why? But she seems to be that point person. And there's no doubt in my mind that the reason why Jimmy Butler decided that he was going to raise hell in practice is because he knew that he was going to be having a sit-down interview with her later that night. And not only would his antics and his hijinks have gotten out by then, but he'd be able to try to control the situation on his own. And that's a major, major factor also with the modern day athlete. They can now control their own narrative. So the media cannot spin what actually occurred out of control anymore because of the internet and social media. So many of these prominent athletes, they really have these professional sports leagues by the balls, proverbially speaking. So it's going to be interesting to see how the NBA owners attempt to adapt to this changing climate. But anyway, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
So, boy, you had an eventful day.
You can say that.
You returned to practice for the first time with the Wolves, and I'm just gonna read a little bit of Adrian Wojnarowski's report on what happened there. That you were loud, emotional, passionate, we like to say, targeting Coach Tom Thibodeau, teammates like Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins.
It's very obvious that Jimmy Butler has little to no respect for Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins in regards to their competitiveness. It's very clear. Now, of course, there are stories floating around that Jimmy Butler allegedly slept with Karl Anthony Towns' woman, quote unquote. I put that term woman in quotes because when it comes to the professional sports sphere, that world, none of these guys really have a woman, especially when they're deciding to dip into the internet world, into the social media world to get their paramours, to get their concubines. They're all sharing the same $2 hose. Every last one of them. Every last one of them are all sleeping with the same woman. It reminds me of a Tupac song back in the day where he said every other city he goes, he sees the same hoes, man. That's what's going on with many of these guys. And deep down, many of these issues that occur between prominent players in the locker room is over a woman. Do I think that this situation is over a woman? Well, that could be part of the component. But I also think that Butler believes that he's the best overall player on the team. And who knows? He may have plotted out trying to sleep with Karl Anthony Towns' woman to show him, I could take your woman and I'm going to take your team. That is the mindset of a conqueror. First, I'm going to take your kingdom. Then I'm going to sleep with your queens. I'm going to sleep with your princesses. I'm going to take everything to let you know that I'm in charge now. So would it surprise me if Jimmy Butler sleeping with Karl Anthony Towns' quote-unquote woman is part of the situation? And no, it would not.
That you told GM Scott Layton, quote, you effing need me. How would you describe what happened today?
A lot of it's true. A lot of it is true. But you got to think, I haven't played basketball in so long, and I'm so passionate, and I love the game, and I don't do it for any other reason except for to compete and go up against the best to try to prove that I can hang. So all my emotion came out at one time. Was it the right way to do it? No. But I can't control that when I'm out there competing. Like, that's my love of the game. That's raw me. Me at my finest. Me at my purest. That's what you're going to get.
And let me say this. There's no doubt in my mind that without Jimmy Butler, the Minnesota Timberwolves will not make the playoffs this year. They will not make the playoffs this year. They will not even come close. Because the real indignity in regards to the Jimmy Butler situation is that he's correct. Karl Anthony Towns is soft, man. And Andrew Wiggins is past soft. He's damn near comatose out there on the basketball floor. This guy's wasting all that talent because he's just not focused. He's not dialed in. And that's what seems to incense Jimmy Butler.
Inside the lines.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome into First Take on this Friday Eve. Thank you so much for hanging with us. He is Stephen A. Smith, looking dapper. Same with this gentleman, Max Kellerman. How we doing, guys? I'm Molly Karen.
We never feel the need to comment on your appearance because it is obvious, Molly.
Oh, thank you.
That is true.
Thank you, guys.
Be careful. In 5 years, she may accuse you of sexual harassment. You have to be careful with the compliments that you give a woman nowadays. That might end up in court. Look at what happened with Kavanaugh.
I appreciate that. We ready to do this because we got a whole lot to talk about today, starting with Jimmy Butler stealing the headlines this morning after being back with his team for the first time since asking for a trade 3 weeks ago. Butler acknowledging to our Rachel Nichols that most of the reports by our Adrian Wojnarowski were true, that he went off during practice targeting President Coach Tom Thibodeau, GM Scott Layden, and teammates Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins. Stephen A., what do you make of Jimmy's explosion onto the court?
Well,
He was trying to force a trade. That's all that really was about. His attitude is, look, you guys made me come back here because at the end of the day I have to report so that I can activate my possible free agency at the end of this season. So I'm going to make your life a living hell. It's almost like a couple that's going through a divorce process, but they're still living together. You know that there's going to be a lot of rancor. There's going to be a lot of antipathy in the household. Jimmy Butler's frustrated, and I'm sure that he's not the only one. Karl Anthony Towns, I'm sure, is very frustrated as well. Because as I've stated in a previous video, the only reason why Karl Anthony Towns decided to re-sign that contract, or to sign that extension, I should say, is based off of the premise that Jimmy Butler would have been traded by now. So I'm sure that everybody's very upset.
Well, I make of it what I made of it months ago when I came right on this set and reported it. What did I tell y'all a couple of months ago? I told you how you felt about Karl Anthony Towns. I told you how you felt about Andrew Wiggins.
Well, shit, you said that a couple of months ago. I said that about 5 or 6 months ago. I've been talking about this issue, and I don't even have any contacts in the NBA industry or the NBA world. So what the hell took you so long? I was just watching body language. I could tell by how Thibodeau was talking to Karl Anthony Towns on the basketball floor that they did not like one another. That Thibodeau thought that Karl Anthony Towns was soft, or that he was dogging it per se, and that Karl Anthony Towns was not feeling how he was being coached.
And what happened yesterday? He strolls into practice after he didn't get the trade that he wanted, which was to end up in Miami.
And that would be a great move for both parties, because Jimmy Butler's personality would fit in perfectly with the Miami Heat culture.
He believed that the Minnesota Timberwolves have been procrastinating and roadblocking a deal to Miami on purpose because their belief is he's not going anywhere. He's going to come up in here and he's going to play for us just like we planned. No need to overreact whatsoever. So what he did was give them a taste of what life is going to be like. Maybe not every day, but periodically. I'm going to question the commitment of Karl Anthony Towns. I know that he cares about winning, but I think he cares just as much about his numbers. I'm going to question him.
Well, of course he cares just as much about his numbers. He's 21 years old, 21, 22 years old. All those players are trying to make all-star teams. They're trying to get their numbers. That's why I state this is a bad mix. When you have a player 29, 30, 31 years old on a team with players who are 21, 22 years old, that's a bad mix because they're after different things. Unless you just have a very special person come into your franchise like a Scottie Pippen who's willing to sacrifice. Of course, when you're 20, 21 years old, you want to get the big contracts, you want to make the all-star teams, you want to make the all-NBA teams. Now, we know that winning goes hand in hand with that, but you also have to have your numbers. So this really is a bad mix overall. They really should trade Jimmy Butler because, to be quite frank with you, he's not good enough to be an alpha on a championship team.
In the heart of Andrew Wiggins, who I think is soft as cottonelle tissue. I'm not talking about me. I'm saying this is what I've been told that Jimmy Butler feels about Karl Anthony Towns. Y'all guess how I know that. My point to you is he's going to go up in there and...
Well, shit, he's right. Karl Anthony Towns is soft. We saw it in the playoffs last year. The man is soft. And Stephen A. Smith, you think that he's soft too. And you think Andrew Wiggins is soft too.
And he is going to make sure that it is known he doesn't want to be here, and here is why. He's going to go after these dudes. Yesterday, let's take into account what transpired. and this is where I really, really want to go with this more so than anything else. We know Jimmy Butler wants out. But we also know that they have contractual rights to him, that if he doesn't go, if he doesn't get traded, but he refuses to play for Minnesota, he's going to lose his money. And when you're the 30th overall pick, you wanted the first overall pick like Karl Anthony Towns or Andrew Wiggins, you don't want to jeopardize your money because you worked hard to get to that point. So we know that. But the point that I want to get to more than anything else, Max, is this. Do you know that folks are reporting not only did Jimmy Butler take the third stringers and beat the starters, but dudes are walking around laughing about it?
That's some Michael Jordan type shit. Jordan used to do that back in the day. When he was a rookie on the Bulls, he used to take the second stringers and third stringers and beat the starters. And the coach at the time, I believe Kevin Lockery, would fuck with Jordan's mind. As Jordan was leading the second or third team to a victory and they had point game, he would switch Jordan back to the starters and make Jordan have to lead a comeback victory. And Jordan would get pissed off about it. But that sounds like some Jordan stuff. And it does not surprise me because Jimmy Butler has that level of focus. I don't doubt that he's the most well-conditioned player on the team. And he's certainly the toughest-minded player on the team. So it would not shock me at all.
No wonder he wants the hell out of there. What is funny? If you are Karl Anthony...
Right, but who was laughing, Stephen A. Smith? Was Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins, were they laughing, or were the third stringers laughing at them?
Anthony Towns, if you are Wiggins, if you are anybody in that starting lineup, please tell me what the hell is funny about Jimmy Butler taking a bunch of third stringers and beating you in practice and letting the world know about that. Tell me what's funny about that, because that don't make sense to me. Go ahead.
It makes sense to me. It's funny because what month are we in right now?
October.
October? Because these guys in a scrimmage in October, when one dude has a premeditated plan of attack to show you up and talk about it because he wants out of town, they're like...
Right, but Max Kellerman, you're supposed to be an elite level basketball player if you're Karl Anthony Towns, if you're Andrew Wiggins. You guys are getting paid so much money. Of course, you should already understand that Jimmy Butler's trying to make a point. The point that he was making is not even necessarily that I could lead the third team against the starters and beat you. His point is that my competitive fervor is so much more intense than yours that not only am I going to beat you, but you're not going to understand why you lost. That's the point. And for you to poo-poo that shows that you don't understand where Jimmy Butler's coming from.
They're like, come on, this is his big statement. They took some guys in the gym and they beat the starters. All right, man, you got it. Jimmy, you got it. Here's what this is about. Spoken to multiple people about this. Yep. It's about money. Jimmy Butler wants to get paid.
Of course he wants to get paid. Who doesn't? At the end of the day, we synchronize respect with money. How much you're willing to pay me is going to establish how much you respect me. And we've all been in workplace environments like that in the past, where we feel like we're working better, smarter, harder than one of our colleagues or compatriots, and they're getting awarded more for whatever reason. Could it be race? Could it be gender? Could it be that they happen to know the boss better? Could it be an issue where they're related? Who knows? But if anyone has ever been in that situation, then you can understand how Jimmy Butler feels about it. Where Jimmy Butler's in the wrong is that he's contractually obligated to play with the Minnesota Timberwolves. So if he feels like he should be paid more than them and they're not willing to pay him, no problem, then you leave at the end of the season. Or you can do like what he's doing, trying to force a trade. But you cannot continue to throw tantrums in the locker room, on the practice floor, or run to the media to try to make yourself a sympathetic figure because it's not going to work. I think that is rather glaring that they're having such a hard time trading Jimmy Butler, because it's very clear that the overall energy around the NBA, the notion around the NBA is that Jimmy Butler is more trouble than he's worth. And Jimmy may have to raise his self-awareness a little bit to understand how he's starting to cast himself and what light he's starting to cast himself.
He went to the team. He wanted the Supermax contract. They didn't want to give it to him. I understand not giving Butler a Supermax. I get it, because ideally he's maybe the third best player, maybe tied for second, third best player on a championship caliber team.
Yes, he's the third best player on a championship caliber team, not second best. Not in this era, where you have the Golden State Warriors, who their second best player is the second or third best player in the NBA. In this NBA, your third best player to win a championship to compete with Golden State has to be Jimmy Butler. He cannot be third best. He cannot be second best, and certainly not first best.
I think in certain circumstances you can give him the max and still win, but you have to be careful. And they want to give Karl Anthony Towns the money. I get that. Whatever you want to say about Karl Anthony Towns, the guy.
Well, that's part of the problem. Jimmy Butler's attitude is, I don't mind being the third highest paid player if I'm playing on Golden State, or even if I'm playing on Houston. But don't have me here in Minnesota and tell me I have to be the third highest paid player. That's the issue, Max Kellerman.
Guy is a
Give him his money.
right?
Give him his money.
I think the real problem is Andrew Wiggins got the money. What does Andrew Wiggins need with it? Good for you, Andrew Wiggins. I'm happy you got paid.
27, 28, 29 over the next 3 years.
Do you even want Andrew Wiggins starting on your team? I wouldn't. I wouldn't want him as a starter. I don't think he's a starting caliber player. Not on a team I would want to put together. I don't know what. He's athletic. That's true. His game really hasn't developed. Really, either side of the ball. And so Jimmy Butler's looking at this like, look at the way these guys get taken care of. You mentioned the #1 overall picks. Boy, they get super max. They get as much money as the team can give them, whether they earned it or not. Stephen A., I'm not talking about Karl Anthony Towns' attitude. I'm just about production now. Andrew Wiggins is not. Forget counting numbers. Andrew Wiggins is not giving you production. Jimmy Butler is. So this is about dough. Jimmy Butler wants his money. Where did he say he wanted to go? The Clippers. The Knicks, the Nets, in other words, anyone with a salary cap space to max them out. Where they don't have other players they need to pay in the near future.
Are you sure
that will
that's
prevent
the
it.
only reason, though? It might not also be wanting to be on the coast in the big markets?
Not only that, Molly Karam, which is a very good point, but he's hoping that he may be able to woo a couple of his friends out there as well. That's really what that's about. Jimmy wants his money, but there's a reason why he's saying, I'll go to the Clippers or I'll go to the Brooklyn Nets or what have you. Because he's possibly thinking that he may be able to woo Kyrie or Kevin Durant to come play with him.
Look carefully at where. Yeah, okay.
And then also understand, once again, he's 30 years old. He has to max out on this next contract, because the contract after this one, #1, may not even come, and #2, if it does come, he's not going to get max dollars on the contract after this next one.
Okay, listen. Do you want to go?
You
to
named
the
the
small
LA
market?
and New York teams.
If you had your druthers, do you want to be in a big market? And yes, but he wants to get paid, so he is getting himself traded. Period.
Max Kellerman, you're not wrong, but understand something. First of all, the Miami Heat's payroll is at $158 million. He didn't mind going there. He would love to go there. So in other words, of course, all of the players want to get paid. Nobody's denying that. But that's not really the impetus for how he has acted. It's one thing to say you want to get traded. It's another thing entirely to conduct yourself the way that he's conducted himself.
Agreed. But Stephen A. Smith, he's trying to throw a tantrum so that he can get moved. That's all it's about. This is what he learned from Kyrie. He knows that in the case of a Kyrie or a Kawhi, he can't say that he's hurt because he's not hurt. So what's the next best thing? Throw a tantrum.
There's some real animus there.
Oh, yeah.
There's a real lack of respect there. And when we talk about Andrew Wiggins, I don't know Andrew Wiggins. I've never even spoken to him. All I can tell you is what players have said about him. They don't think he cares. They think he cares.
It looks like he doesn't care. When you watch him play out on the basketball floor, it looks like the man does not care.
Cares about his money. That he don't give a damn whether they win or lose. This is what they've said about him. Now, again, I haven't spoken to him. I don't know, but that's what they say. When you are a guy, here's what I can tell you as somebody who knows Jimmy Butler, who has spoken to Jimmy Butler on several occasions, along with various others. I'm telling you, he has always been somebody that cared. When I went to Chicago and talked to Jimmy Butler when he was a member of the Chicago Bulls, and you had cats in there, he was questioning the coach. He was questioning some of the players. He was questioning hearts. He's the kind of guy.
Well, he's always been like that. I mean, let's be for real. They kind of got jealous of Jimmy Butler over in Chicago. Many of those players on the Bulls who were considered the movers and the shakers when Jimmy Butler first got there and was considered just a defensive stopper, they started to get resentful of Jimmy as he started to rise through the ranks of their squad. Because it was almost like this guy was on the third team, and now all of a sudden he's the alpha. They had a hard time dealing with that. Luol Deng and Joakim Noah and, of course, Derrick Rose, they had an issue with Jimmy Butler's meteoric rise. And he didn't give a shit back then, and he still doesn't give a shit. So you have to understand what type of culture you're going to bring him into. because he's someone who is going to question what's going on. That's why I think that Miami will be perfect for him, because I believe that he'd fit in perfectly with that system, with that coach, and with that front office.
Where if you show him an inkling of not caring enough, it is offensive to him, and he is going to take it out on you and bring attention to you any way
I'm not saying
can.
no. I'm not saying no to that. The fact of the matter is, where he was drafted and then what he became is sort of unique in NBA history.
Okay.
In the sense that he came out of nowhere to be a defensive stopper, and that's what he's known. A guy averaged 5 points, whatever, but he's a defensive stopper. And
well, there's a history, there's a precedent for guys coming out of nowhere. Now, I can't remember too many players who were drafted 30th in the first round who became multiple-time All-Stars, but I'm sure that there are some. Some of you brothers out there can correct me on that. But just off the top of my head, the great Dennis Rodman, I believe that he was drafted late in the first round. You also had John Stockton, who was drafted in the middle, like the middle-late part of the first round, but nobody thought that he was going to become one of the greatest small men and one of the greatest point guards of all time. Still the all-time leader in steals and assists. But yes, what Jimmy has done is great. Now, Scottie Pippen was drafted very high in the first round, but he came from nowhere. I believe he came from like Central Arkansas or something like that.
And he built himself up into a 20-something point a game scorer, all-star, centerpiece, the thought was not long ago, of a team that could really challenge the best teams. Jimmy Butler was one of the building block kind of players. I don't know that that's ever happened quite like that. So he is wired differently than other people, right? His wiring is not going to be the same. Yeah, I appreciate that. And the animus is obviously real right away. Everything that I've heard, right away with Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins, the animosity was real. But if you're going to ask, why is this happening? You need to select one reason. It's because he wanted the max contract. They didn't give it to him. They gave it to them, and now he wants out. He wants to get paid.
He didn't want to stay.
Well, he knows that they're not going to pay three guys the max. And I don't blame him when he does not respect the two players that are getting paid more than him. It's going to be difficult for him to lead when you have two other guys on the team getting paid more than him. So it's just a very untenable situation. I don't think that they're really going to move him, because I think that Thibodeau is going to try to play hardball with many of these teams across the NBA. Thibodeau understands that his future as coach and GM of Minnesota is directly tied to Jimmy Butler, because the attitude is from the owner, Glenn Taylor, is Thibodeau, you made this move. Now you better figure out what the fuck to do, because if you have to move him, I'm going to fire you. And I believe that's the reason why Thibodeau has been so hesitant to move Jimmy Butler, because he knows his future is directly tied to Jimmy Butler.
Stay there. He didn't want to stay in Minnesota.
I
would never say no. Even before then, he would be hopeful that he'd get the money and get traded out there. What I'm trying to say to you is every player wants their money.
All right.
The point that I'm trying to make to you is even if he got his money, he would be looking to get his money and move.
Okay, let me segue on that, because obviously he still wants out of Minnesota. But this is the thing I want to know, Stephen A. Do you feel like that outburst on the court, this interview, that this actually hurts his trade value?
I believe it does. I believe it does, and here's why.
It absolutely does, and I've said this already. Number one, he's not good enough to possibly be a cancer in the locker room and have another team want to bring him on because he's going to play good defense and average 22 a game. He's just not good enough. So he can only be moved to certain spots, and then on top of that, he's 30 years old. If he was 22, there may have been some other teams that would have said, you know what, let's give Jimmy a try. Let's see what we can get out of this issue or out of this acquisition. But he's 30. So how many teams are going to be looking for Jimmy Butler? You have Miami. You have maybe a couple of other teams. Boston doesn't need him. Now, the Rockets could use him, but the asking price for him has been too high. So who else really is going to want him? Oklahoma City really does not need him. They already have Paul George. I mean, he would be a great replacement for Roberson, but they're not going to be able to get him for Roberson straight up. So he's pretty much stuck there.
Why? It limits the options. Now, he doesn't care because he wants his options limited because there's only certain places he wants to go. Like, for example, if you're talking about the Clippers, where Doc Rivers is there, Jerry West is a consultant, etc., you're not worried about handling a Jimmy Butler. Miami, that's Pat Riley.
Yeah.
That's like, Eric Spoelstra, yes, I love Eric Spoelstra. That's Pat Riley's town. Nobody's coming in there and running South Beach. Just ask LeBron. He couldn't even pull it off, ain't he?
Exactly. That's why his ass got up and went and took his ass back to Cleveland, because he said to himself, now this is a real alpha right here. This guy's not going to let me dictate what's going on here. He's not going to let me bring my confusion in here. And he's not going to let me create narratives. So let me get the hell up out of here.
And he's LeBron. Okay, so you're not worried about Jimmy Butler coming to your squad there. And so when you look at it from that perspective, you're thinking along the lines that if I land in the right spot, I'll be okay. But my concern about Jimmy Butler doing this is that you came across angry, a bit acerbic, and I
think that was intentional, Stephen A. Smith. He wanted to come across angry and a bit acerbic. Why wouldn't he? He wants out. He's not going to get on TV and smile. He believes that he can do what Kyrie Irving had done, which is say, look, I don't want to play here, so trade me. It's not going to work for him, though. At least I don't think it's going to work, but we'll see. Maybe Minnesota will soften up their stance and move him to Miami. But once again, Thibodeau understands that the clock is ticking on his job with the Minnesota Timberwolves, or his jobs, I should say. Because Glenn Taylor's looking at him like, you know what, you really fucked this up, man. You fucked this up. You almost had it to where our young prospect, our young superstar, Karl Anthony Towns, did not want to resign here. You brought in this guy who's a very good player, borderline great player, but not good enough to lead us to a championship. And now he's bringing all of this entropy into our locker room.
Gave executives around the league as an excuse to talk about your behavior just as much as they talk about your game. And in my experience of covering the NBA, it is rare. I'm not going to say never, but it is rare that works in your favor.
Real quick, I have one quick question before you jump in. Will they be saying he's a diva because of what happened in Chicago, Minnesota? Is that what's going around?
Not the word diva. Okay. They're going to look at the volatility with which...
Yeah, they're going to say agent of chaos.
Which Woj reported yesterday in terms of how he walked into practice. It wasn't just the players he was going after. It was coaches. It was an executive like Scott Layden, that kind of stuff. Those are the kind of things that can follow you unless you land in the right situation.
What do you mean by did it hurt his trade potential? Do you mean the reality that he will be traded? It helped that. Did it hurt?
No, I mean that teams aren't going to want.
I'm not even quite sure if it helped that, Max Kellerman. Maybe it did. Maybe it will. We'll see. As of right now, he still has not been moved. But if you're another team, how do you feel seeing a player go on national television and pretty much smirk and smile and brag about how he caused contention in practice? How many teams are happy about that? How many teams are saying to themselves, well, will he try that here if he's not happy with his role? I don't think that he's thought this out long enough.
Aren't going to want him.
There will be fewer teams who now want Jimmy Butler.
Yeah.
But there will be someone.
There will be someone, and we can talk about that at some point in this show a little later. Where, right? Destination.
Yeah.
But let me say this. The culprit here is actually Tom Thibodeau.
I agree.
Thibodeau's the culprit. Jimmy Butler basically got him fired in Chicago. Thibodeau winds up with a new team, and the first thing he does, as soon as he can, is package Dunn and Levine and what turned out to be Lauri Markkanen.
Yep.
Imagine if those guys were on the team now.
Well, Max Kellerman, what you're saying is not making sense. You said that Jimmy Butler got Tom Thibodeau fired, but then Tom Thibodeau, as soon as he pops up on another team, wants to trade all of his young assets for Jimmy Butler. So clearly, Tom Thibodeau does not believe that the reason why he was fired was because of Jimmy Butler. Tom Thibodeau got fired because he runs all of his horses into the ground. That's why. And Jimmy Butler has proven to be the only horse who does not allow himself to get ran into the ground.
And by the way, I thought, oh my God, Thibodeau just fleeced the Bulls. Boy, was I wrong, because actually the Bulls fleeced the T-Wolves, as it turns out.
Well, we'll see. It depends on how good the Bulls turn out to be. They have yet to make the playoffs. I'm not expecting them to make the playoffs this year, but they do have to make it next year. They have to start making the playoffs for anyone to say, well, you know, they got the better of that deal.
If Zach LaVine stays healthy.
Yeah,
Markkanen is good.
Zach LaVine can score. Markkanen, now imagine pairing Markkanen.
Zach LaVine can score, but he gives you a cheap 18 to 20 a game. Can he give you an impactful 20 a game?
Markkanen with Karl Anthony Towns.
Right.
Good luck, everybody. That is a tough Twin Towers. And then you have guys under team control for a long time. They're inexpensive. They're young. They're improving. They're good. There's not a chemistry issue as there is now. Thibodeau makes this deal And within how many minutes would you say the guy he brought in, who was a problem in Chicago in terms of alienating teammates and stuff like that, making it about him, all those things, how many minutes did it take for Butler to have a problem with Towns and Wiggins?
Well,
5 minutes, 10 minutes?
I think you're bringing up the wrong thing. First of all, you're wrong. Jimmy Butler did not get Tom Thibodeau fired in Chicago.
That's obvious.
Tom Thibodeau had a very questionable relationship with Paxson and Gar Forman.
Absolutely.
That is well known. They had a very they had.
Did Butler contribute to the problem or not?
Well, he didn't help in the end. He didn't help in the end. But what I'm saying is that relation.
They also had an issue, if I remember correctly, with Randy Brown, who I believe they stated Randy Brown, an assistant coach, who used to be a role player on the second three-peat team with the Chicago Bulls. I believe he was an assistant coach under Thibodeau, and he was running back and forth, snitching on what the players were saying in the locker room. It was just a whole bunch of nonsense going on in the Bulls locker room at that time period.
Relationship was stained for years leading up to that. It was at a point where Tom Thibodeau would be running practice, and obviously Derrick Rose was hurt and he was coming back, and literally Paxson and Foreman was standing at mid-court monitoring practice to make sure that Tom Thibodeau didn't work Derrick Rose too hard.
Absolutely, ding, because they understood that Tom Thibodeau was running all their assets into the ground. And I stated that before Tom Thibodeau got a job. I have no idea why people continue to hire that man. He's not a head coach. He's a defensive coordinator. That's all he is.
So the Thibodeau relationship, his exit from Chicago had little to do with Jimmy Butler. That's all I'm trying to say about that.
Butler did not help, and in fact, he hurt. And in fact, what I hear from people who know is that Jimmy Butler was part of the problem with Thibodeau, and is one of the reasons that Thibodeau is gone. Now,
okay.
Well, that's
okay.
right.
That's what you heard. Okay, that's what you heard. I'm not going to debate that. I'm just giving you facts. But I understand. I respect that. My point to you is, in Minnesota, when you look at Jimmy Butler, he's got a problem with Towns. He's got a problem with Andrew Wiggins. He's got a problem. You can talk about his money, but I'm telling you, even if he had his money, he would still be looking to get moved out of Minnesota.
So the reason I say Thibodeau is the problem is not that Butler is not a problem. I mentioned the way he's wired is different. He's like a little off. He's not like everybody else. That's how he turned himself into this great player and came out of nowhere.
I agree with that. When you have that fire within you, though, you have to moderate that fire. Because if you don't moderate that fire, like the old saying goes, fire can be used to light your home. It can be used to heat your home. But if you let it get out of control, it can be used to burn your home down.
But it also affects things in other ways, super competitive and everything like that.
Right.
Thibodeau is also...
Yes, a lot like Michael Jordan.
So, not like everybody else. He's wired a little differently. Thibodeau is like Butler, a kind of unique kind of cat.
He definitely is.
And these are two guys who seem to alienate people around them pretty quickly. And so if Thibodeau was already like that, and he just had this issue with Butler in the previous place, he gave up all those young players to bring Butler in, and lo and behold, here's the bottom line to answer your question.
Yeah.
Well, the reason why he gave up all those young players to bring in Butler was because he was trying to add toughness to the team. He realized right away that he could not have Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins as the captains on that team because they're both soft, man. That's why he did that. Once again, there are just certain teams, and this happens in every era of sports, not just basketball. But in this case, we'll talk about basketball. There are always teams in every era that are good, but they're just not meant to win. When you look at the history of the NBA, there are very few teams that have actually won the title. Basically, the chronicling of the NBA's history goes according to the dynasties. In the 60s, of course, there were the Celtics. Now, the 70s, there were no dynastic teams. And the 70s is known as a transitional period in the NBA. In the 80s, of course, you had the Lakers and the Celtics, and then later on the Pistons, and then the Bulls, then the rise of San Antonio and the Kobe Shaq Lakers. Then you had the Kobe Pau Gasol Lakers, and then, of course, the Miami Heat, and now the Golden State Warriors. And, I mean, pretty much that's been the history of the league. So this notion that every team has a chance to win, that's just not true.
They will trade Butler for sure. They will get less for him than they gave up to get him. Who is that on? Butler or Thibodeau?
Well, listen, it's on Thibodeau, but for a different reason. It's on Thibodeau because Thibodeau has been the #1 roadblock to a deal with Miami.
Ding.
Thibodeau is the one that asked for the house. He's the one that's trying to make it difficult to acquire Butler
because he knows that if he lets Miami get away with quote-unquote fleecing them for Jimmy Butler, he's going to get fired. That's why Stephen A. Smith. Thibodeau knows he's done anyway.
He is the one that doesn't want to let go of Butler. Owner Glenn Taylor wants Butler gone. He's like, get rid of him. He gave Thibodeau his marching orders. He said the man wants out. Let him go. Let's make sure we get equitable compensation for him if we can, but let him go. And Thibodeau doesn't want to lose Butler. So his mentality is, I can stall, if not flat out roadblock these negotiations, make sure a deal doesn't get done. Butler ends up staying. I can deal with Jimmy Butler.
That's exactly what his attitude is. I can deal with Jimmy. I know Jimmy.
Don't you worry. And Jimmy Butler's like, oh, hell no. I'm not down with that. Now, obviously, he ain't going to sit out because he wants to play the game. He loves playing, plus he wants to get paid. So he's not going to sit out. But what he is going to do is make sure that you understand at every turn, I don't want to be here. You're forcing me to be here. Let me leave and go someplace else where I want to be. That's what this is about, plain and simple.
I agree with you, sir.
Before we move on, if you were advising Jimmy, how would you have told him to handle this? Because I'm wondering if sitting down like this is ever advantageous for a player when they're talking about teammates.
Well,
absolutely not. It is not advantageous, but it's very, very clear that Jimmy Butler has an inferiority complex and he's looking for attention. That's very obvious. He also lacks self-awareness. And then when you mix that with his super competitive nature, kind of Kobe Jordan-esque nature in regards to competitiveness and being confrontational, but he's not an alpha on a championship team like those two guys were. So this is creating a very poor environment, a very poor energy around Jimmy Butler. I'm not quite sure if he realizes that, but he figures, you know what, I've already started, I might as well finish what I started.
Well, I would have said to him, you've done enough, you've said enough. If you really, really want to make a statement, miss the first month of the season. Sit out the first month of the season. Silence and a conspicuous absence, the combination of the two would have been far more profound against the Timberwolves organization.
I would have told Jimmy Butler, you know what, bro, you signed a contract. Just play out your contract. You're 30 years old. You'll have the opportunity to re-up with another team next year. That's what I would have told him. Because odds are you're not going to be traded to a championship contender, especially with how dead set Thibodeau is on keeping you. Just stay with the team. Play out your year. It is what it is.
Than you showing out in practice during preseason.
We have to move on, but we're going to get into this a lot more later because I want to...
But anyway, that's basically it on the Jimmy Butler situation. We'll see how things turn out for him. Peace.